The air smelled like pine needles and expensive wine, the kind Mom always ordered to impress people she wanted something from. Christmas music played softly through the restaurant speakers, and fairy lights twinkled across the windows of Bellini's, the Italian place our family had gone to every Christmas Eve for 15 years. I could see them through the window, all of them, laughing and clinking glasses at our usual table. The table I hadn't been invited to. My phone still held the screenshot of Mom's text from 3 days ago. Christmas dinner is for successful family members only this year. Megan, we think it's best you stay home. No hard feelings. 30 minutes later, my sister Courtney had added her own message. Don't take it personally. We just don't want any losers bringing down the vibe. Maybe next year if you get your life together? I sat in my car, my brand new Porsche 911 Carrera, Arctic Gray, $135,000, and smiled. Small, calm, dangerous. Before I tell you what happened when I walked into that restaurant, you need to understand how I got here. You need to understand what kind of family celebrates Christmas by excluding their own daughter. I grew up in a house where love had conditions, and I never met them. People say family is supposed to be your safe place. Mine was a performance I was never cast correctly in. From the moment Courtney was born 2 years after me, I became the stage crew while she played the lead. I didn't understand it at 7. By 17, I'd stopped trying to. When Courtney turned 16, Mom and Dad bought her a brand new BMW, white with a red bow, parked in the driveway like a car commercial. She screamed and jumped and posted 17 photos on Instagram. When I turned 16, I got a $200 check and a lecture about how I needed to start saving for a used car because we can't afford to spoil both of you. I worked 30 hours a week junior year to buy a Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. Mom called it character building. Courtney got straight C's and received tutors' encouragement and praise for trying her best. I got straight A's and was told not to brag because nobody likes a show-off. When I got into Columbia on a full academic scholarship, Mom's response was, well, someone has to pay for Courtney's sorority dues, so at least you're not costing us money. When Courtney dropped out of college after 3 semesters, she moved back home rent-free. When I graduated summa cum laude and moved to a studio apartment in Brooklyn, Mom said I was abandoning the family. But here's the thing about being the family scapegoat. You learn to survive. And sometimes surviving looks a lot like succeeding. What my family did, what I deliberately never told them was that I hadn't stayed in that Brooklyn studio. I hadn't stayed struggling. 3 years ago, I'd been recruited by Morrison & Blake, one of the top consulting firms in the country. Last month, I'd made partner. At 31, I was one of the youngest partners in the firm's history. The Porsche was a gift to myself. Not because I needed validation from my therapist and I had worked through that years ago, but because I de-earned it. Every late night, every impossible client, every time I de-proven myself twice as hard as everyone else because I de-grown up being told I wasn't enough. My therapist, Dr. Reyes, had said something during our last session that stuck with me. You're not being paranoid, Megan. You're being prepared. Boundaries aren't punishments, they're definitions. For 3 years, I'd kept my success quiet. Not because I was ashamed. Because I was watching, testing. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family event, I waited to see if they'd ever ask about my life, my work, my happiness. They never did. Courtney's failed boutique got discussed for 2 hours. My promotion was met with, that's nice. Can you pass the potatoes? Last month when I made partner, I'd waited to see if anyone would notice. Mom had called, but only to ask if I could send Courtney $500 for a small emergency. The emergency was a spa weekend.
I'd said no.
That was when the Christmas exclusion text arrived. I'd known this moment would come. Not this exact scenario, but something like it, a final, undeniable confirmation that I was nothing to them but a resource. When I'd stopped being useful, I'd become disposable. My husband Marcus had been the one to suggest we go anyway. You don't need their invitation, he'd said calmly, his thumb brushing my wrist the way he did when he was grounding me. You need closure. Marcus came from the kind of family I used to think only existed in movies. His parents called just to check in. His mom sent me birthday cards with handwritten notes. When I had first met them, I cried in the bathroom because his father had asked about my job and actually listened to the answer. They're at Bellini's, I'd said. Our Christmas Eve place, Marcus had smiled. That calm, unreadable look that had made me fall in love with him 5 years ago. Then let's go to Bellini's. I stepped out of the Porsche and smoothed my coat. Cashmere, charcoal gray. Marcus took my hand. Steady, certain. The hostess recognized me. I'd been coming here since I was 16. Megan, we haven't seen you in so long. Are you joining the Montgomery party? Yes, I said calmly. I believe there's been some confusion about my reservation. I saw them before they saw me. Mom in her red Christmas sweater, pearl earrings, and perfectly styled hair. Dad scrolling on his phone, half present as always. Courtney in a sequin dress that probably cost more than my first month's rent in Brooklyn, taking a selfie with her champagne. And an empty chair, a fifth place setting. They'd set a place for Marcus's seat. They'd expected him to come alone. Mom looked up first. Her rehearsed smile flickered. Megan? What are you? Her eyes dropped to my coat, traveled to the window where my Porsche sat gleaming under the streetlight. What is that? Merry Christmas, Mom. My voice didn't shake. I heard Christmas was for successful family members only. So I came. Courtney's phone clattered to the table. Is that a Porsche? Did you rent a Porsche? I bought it. I pulled out the chair next to the empty setting, the one meant for Marcus and sat. Marcus settled beside me, calm and unhurried. 3 weeks ago. Cash. Dad finally looked up from his phone. I don't understand. How could you afford? I made partner at Morrison and Blake last month. I smiled. Not bitter, not angry, just calm. I'm one of the youngest partners in the firm's history. My compensation package this year is a little over $500,000. The table went silent.
The Christmas music kept playing.
Somewhere across the restaurant, silverware clinked against plates, but at our table, nothing moved. Mom's mouth opened, closed. Her perfume, that heavy floral scent I could never breathe through, seemed to fill the entire space between us. Partner? But you never said you work at some consulting place. You said it was fine. You never asked. I folded my napkin, set it on the table. In 3 years, you never once asked about my job, my life, my marriage. You asked me for money. You asked me to help Courtney. You told me I wasn't successful enough to attend Christmas dinner. Now wait just a minute, Dad started. Robert, Marcus's voice was quiet, final. Dad stopped talking. Courtney's face had gone white beneath her carefully applied blush. This is insane. You're lying. There's no way you're the failure. You've always been the failure. Mom said what? I looked at my mother. That I'd never amount to anything? That Courtney was the successful one? Mom's smile was cracking. I could see it, the edges curling, the facade beginning to crumble. Sweetheart, we never meant. This is a misunderstanding. We're so proud of you. We always have been. The text was just Courtney was upset about something, and the text was 3 days ago. You had 72 hours to correct the misunderstanding. You didn't. Because we didn't know. Courtney's voice had gone shrill. You should have told us. I shouldn't have had to. The words hung there. Simple. True. Marcus reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. Cream-colored, heavy paper. He set it on the table in front of me. What's that? Mom's voice had changed. Uncertain now. Afraid. I slid the envelope across the table toward her. 3 years of documented text messages, emails, and financial requests. Every time you asked me for money while calling me a failure. Every time you excluded me while inviting Courtney. Every time you made it clear I wasn't family. Mom didn't touch the envelope. Why would you? Because I needed to see it clearly. All of it. Every pattern, every manipulation, every lie. My therapist suggested documentation. She was right. Dad cleared his throat. Can we not do this here? This is Christmas, for God's sake. You're right. I stood. This is Christmas. A holiday I wasn't invited to. I looked at each of them, Mom with her cracking composure, Dad with his desperate discomfort, Courtney with mascara already starting to smudge. I came to say goodbye, not to dinner. To this, all of this. Megan, please, Mom's voice broke. For a moment, just a moment, I almost believed it was real. We can fix this. We're family. Family doesn't send exclusion texts. I pulled on my coat. Family asks questions. Family shows up. Family doesn't call you a failure and then expect you to keep funding their lifestyle. Courtney jerked like I'd slapped her. What do you mean, funding? The $500 last month, the $800 before that. The $2,000 for your boutique that closed after 6 weeks. I'd stopped keeping track years ago, but the numbers lived in my documentation now. $37,000 over 5 years, Courtney. Every time Mom said you had a small emergency, I was the emergency fund. That's not... Courtney looked at Mom. You told me that money was from the family account. Mom's face went gray. I didn't need to say anything else. The silence said everything. Marcus and I walked out of Bellini's as the Christmas music shifted to Silent Night behind us. I could hear Courtney's voice rising, demanding answers. Dad trying to calm everyone down. Mom's carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The Porsche's engine purred to life. Through the restaurant window, I could see them still at the table, but no longer eating. No longer celebrating. Mom had her head in her hands. Courtney was crying. Dad was staring at his phone like it held the answers to everything that had just happened. My phone buzzed. Then again, then continuously. I turned it to silent and pulled out of the parking lot. The calls started the next morning. By 9 a.m., 12 missed calls from Mom, 8 from Courtney, 3 from Dad. By noon, 27 missed calls total, plus a string of texts ranging from "we need to talk to you" destroying this family to "how could you do this on Christmas?" By the next day, 47 calls, voicemails I didn't listen to. A Facebook message from my aunt asking what had happened at dinner. By day 3, 92 calls. Mom had started sending emails. Courtney had found my office number and called 3 times before my assistant stopped putting her through. I didn't respond to any of them. What I did do was transfer the remaining $400,000 in my savings into a joint account with Marcus money my family now knew existed and might try to claim some fictional entitlement to. I also contacted my lawyer to ensure my estate planning was airtight. This is more common than you'd think, my lawyer, Patricia, had said over the phone. Family discovers hidden wealth, suddenly acts entitled to it. You're smart to get ahead of this. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being prepared. The consequences moved faster than I had expected. By New Year's Eve, I learned through a mutual friend that Courtney's credit card had been declined at a restaurant. Turns out, Mom had been supplementing Courtney's independent lifestyle with money she told Dad was going to household expenses. When Dad saw the documentation I'd left at Bellini's, every transfer, every request, every lie itemized the conversation hadn't gone well. Courtney's apartment was in Mom's name. Her car payment came from an account Dad didn't know existed. Her successful boutique had been funded entirely by a second mortgage Mom had taken out without telling anyone. 31 years of favoritism, and it had all been built on lies. Dad called me once, 3 days after Christmas. Not to apologize, just to ask in a tired voice if I'd known about the second mortgage. No, I'd said calmly. But I'm not surprised. He'd hung up without saying goodbye. I hadn't expected anything else. Courtney's Instagram went dark on January 2nd. The carefully curated photos of brunch and boutiques and blessed life disappeared. My aunt mentioned in a group text I was still inexplicably included in that Courtney had moved back home and was going through some things. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, not vindication. Just a quiet recognition that consequences were simply consequences. I hadn't created them. I just stopped preventing them. 2 weeks later, I sat in our living room, the brownstone Marcus, and I had bought last year, with the bay windows and the original hardwood floors and the kitchen that was finally completely ours. Morning light streamed through the curtains. Coffee steamed in my hands. The phone sat silent on the counter. The silence was different now. It wasn't the heavy silence of waiting for the next demand, the next disappointment, the next reminder that I wasn't enough. It was the kind of silence that settles after a storm passes. Earned, peaceful, mine. Marcus had made pancakes. His mother's recipe, the one she taught me last Thanksgiving, while my own mother was texting to ask if I could lend Courtney money for Christmas shopping. The kind of Sunday morning I'd never had growing up. "How do you feel?" he asked, setting a plate in front of me. I considered the question. Really considered it. Took a sip of coffee and let the warmth spread through my chest. Light, I said finally. Like I've been carrying something I didn't know had weight. Like I've been breathing through glass my whole life and someone finally opened a window. He nodded. He understood. His family had taken me in without question, without conditions, without keeping score. His mother called me sweetheart, and meant it. His father asked about my cases at dinner and actually listened to the answers. They'd show me what love actually looked like, and in doing so, made it impossible to keep accepting the counterfeit version my family had offered. My phone buzzed. One more text from Mom. We can work through this. Family forgives, please call me. I'm your mother. I read it. Set the phone down. Didn't respond. 2 days ago, she'd sent a longer message. Something about how I'd humiliated her at the restaurant, how Courtney was devastated, how I needed to think about what I'd done to this family. She'd ended it with, "After everything we sacrificed for you." I'd screenshot it and sent it to Dr. Reyes. Her response had been simple. "Notice she still hasn't asked how you're doing." She was right. 92 calls, 47 texts, 3 emails, and not a single one had asked if I was okay. Not a single one had acknowledged the exclusion text. Not a single one had said, "I'm sorry." They never would. I'd made peace with that. Boundaries don't destroy families. They define them. And for 30 years, my family had been defined by what they could take from me, my money, my time, my emotional energy, my sense of self-worth. Now it was defined by what I finally stopped giving. The calls would slow eventually. They always did, according to Dr. Reyes. First the guilt trips, then the anger, then the extinction burst of desperate attempts, then silence. I was somewhere between anger and extinction burst. Soon, it would be over. Not the hurt that would take longer. Years, maybe. Therapy sessions I'd already scheduled. Moments when I'd see a mother and daughter laughing together and feel that old ache rise up. But the hurt would change. It would become something I carried instead of something that carried me. That was the difference. That was what I'd chosen. I looked around my living room. At the built-in bookshelves Marcus had installed last summer. At the photos on the mantel, our wedding, his parents' anniversary, our trip to Portugal. At the life I'd built with my own hands, my own work, my own choices. At the man who loved me without conditions. At the peace I'd chosen. Outside, snow was falling. Soft and quiet, blanketing the city in white. Later, Marcus and I would walk to the coffee shop on the corner, the one where the barista knew our order. We'd hold hands and talk about nothing important. We'd come home and make dinner and fall asleep on the couch watching something stupid on Netflix. A normal Sunday. An ordinary life. The kind of ordinary I used to dream about while Mom's perfume suffocated me and Courtney's demands echoed through the house and Dad's silence enabled all of it. The phone stayed silent. I used to think peace meant everyone getting along. That family meant tolerating anything because blood was supposed to be thicker than boundaries. I used to think that if I just tried harder, gave more, apologized better, they'd finally see me. Now I know that peace sometimes means walking away. That family is defined by how people treat you, not by genetics. That some apologies are just manipulation wearing a mask. And I know this. I didn't destroy my family. I just stopped pretending it existed. For the first time in 31 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not at their table. Not in their narrative. Not playing the role they'd assigned me. Just here, just me, just free. The coffee was warm. The snow kept falling. And somewhere across the city, my mother was learning what it felt like to have boundaries enforced. I hoped someday she'd learn what they meant. But I wouldn't be waiting to find out. If you've ever had to draw a line with family, if you've ever had to choose yourself over people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, share your story below. You're not alone. Your boundaries aren't selfish. Your peace matters. The day I stopped apologizing was the day I started living. They'll remember me as the one who finally stopped bleeding for them. And I'll remember myself as the one who chose to heal.